Emily Carter stood in front of the nursery's large window, sunlight streaming in and casting a warm glow over the soft pink and cream tones of the room. Her hands instinctively rested on her round belly, gently rubbing in small circles as she smiled to herself. At 7 months pregnant, Emily glowed with maternal joy and anticipation. Everything in her life felt like a dream, the kind of dream she had imagined since she was a little girl, playing house with dolls and pretending to be a mother. Now, the dream had come to life. Her husband, Richard Carter, was one of the most successful businessmen in the city. He owned a chain of luxury hotels and had recently been featured in Forbes for his innovative approach to hospitality. Tall, handsome, and always impeccably dressed, Richard was the kind of man people admired in public and envied in private. But to Emily, he was her rock, caring, attentive, and endlessly generous. He always made sure she had everything she needed, especially since she became pregnant. From weekly spa treatments to the best prenatal care money could buy, Richard ensured Emily was treated like royalty. They lived in an elegant estate on the outskirts of the city, where each corner reflected Emily's personal touch and refined sense of comfort. The nursery had just been completed last week with the help of an interior designer. Plush carpets, custom crib, whimsical wallpaper with clouds and stars. A closet full of adorable baby clothes, all color-coordinated and still smelling faintly of fresh cotton, waited quietly for the little one's arrival. Emily walked down the hall, where the smell of freshly baked cinnamon rolls lingered from breakfast. Richard had surprised her that morning with a bouquet of roses and a handwritten note, "To my queen and our future princess. I love you both." Her heart swelled just remembering it. Downstairs, her best friend Laura was sitting in the kitchen, going over the details of the baby shower. Emily had chosen Laura to be her maid of honor at their wedding, and since childhood, they had shared every major milestone. "Okay, so the flower arrangements are confirmed, peonies and roses in blush tones," Laura said, flipping through her notebook. "And the catering team said they'll bring the dessert table with the customized cookies and cupcakes shaped like rattles and baby bottles." Emily giggled. "It's going to be perfect. I can't believe we're really doing this." Laura smiled warmly. "You deserve it all, Em. After everything you've been through, this baby is your light." Emily's eyes misted slightly. It was true, there had been a miscarriage 2 years ago, a silent grief that had nearly shattered her. But Richard had stayed strong for both of them, comforting her through the darkest nights. This pregnancy had been cautious joy at first, but now, with every flutter and kick, she felt hope blooming again. She had everything: a loving husband, a loyal best friend, a beautiful home, and a child on the way. As she leaned back into her chair, sipping the herbal tea Laura had made, she whispered to herself, "Life is perfect." But somewhere beyond the warm walls of her sanctuary, that perfect picture was already beginning to crack. While Emily busied herself with nursery plans and baby shower details, a different story was unfolding behind her back, one cloaked in secrecy and danger. At Richard's sleek downtown office, the glass walls and polished smiles concealed the whispers that had begun to circulate. Vanessa Morgan, Richard's 26-year-old secretary, was no longer simply his assistant. The staff had started noticing the way she lingered too long in his office, the way her laugh echoed louder than necessary when he passed by, and the way she wore heels just a bit too high and skirts a bit too short. It started innocently enough, a late-night project here, an after-hours meeting there. But soon, Richard stopped hiding it as carefully. Vanessa, with her cascading red hair and sultry confidence, grew bolder by the day. She would leave lipstick stains on the rim of his coffee mug, touch his arm just a bit too intimately in front of others, and once, someone swore they saw the two of them leaving the building together well past midnight. But in meetings, she played the role of the loyal assistant, never overstepping in front of outsiders. Laura, who occasionally visited the office to drop off documents or accompany Emily to lunch nearby, began to notice the tension. The way Vanessa looked at Richard was not professional, it was possessive. There were whispers among staff, carefully spoken behind closed doors or in hushed tones by the coffee machine. "She's sleeping with the boss," one in turn muttered under their breath. "He's not hiding it anymore." Laura didn't want to believe it. Emily had always trusted Richard so deeply. The thought of shattering her peace during pregnancy made Laura hesitate. But the signs were growing harder to ignore. Meanwhile, Vanessa was growing more and more impatient. What had started as a flirtation had turned into an obsession. She didn't want to play second anymore. "You said you'd leave her," she whispered to Richard during one of their stolen moments in the office, her nails digging into his arm. "She's about to have your baby, and you still won't end it. What are you waiting for?" Richard, trapped between a perfect public image and a private mess of his own making, kept dodging her ultimatums. "Just give me time," he'd say, his voice tight. But Vanessa wasn't willing to wait much longer. And Laura knew, sooner or later, Emily would have to find out. The cream and gold baby shower invitations lay neatly stacked on Emily's desk, each one carefully addressed and sealed with a delicate wax stamp shaped like a tiny heart. The design was pure elegance, handwritten calligraphy, soft floral accents, and a subtle shimmer that made the cards feel as special as the moment they represented. Emily had poured her heart into planning this event, wanting it to be not just a celebration, but a memory she could cherish forever. She reviewed the guest list one more time, making sure everyone important was included: close friends, family, and of course, Richard's business associates. She wanted the day to reflect not just her joy but the unity of their lives together. One name made her pause for a second: Vanessa Morgan. She hadn't interacted much with Richard's secretary, but she had always been polite during company events. Emily thought it would be rude not to include someone who worked so closely with her husband. With a smile of naive trust, she slipped the final invitation into an envelope with Vanessa's name printed in gold. When Vanessa received the envelope on her desk, her eyes lit up, not with joy, but with a dark thrill. The baby shower. How fitting, she thought, that Emily would invite the woman sleeping with her husband to the event celebrating their unborn child. She stared at the elegant script for a long time before tucking the card into her purse. "This is it," she whispered to herself later that night, seated in her apartment filled with luxury gifts from Richard, jewelry, designer clothes, a purse she'd bragged about on Instagram. "She wants to play perfect wife? Fine. Let's see how perfect her little fairy tale stays after I'm done." Vanessa began to plan, something bold, something that would unravel Emily's illusion in front of everyone. Not just expose the affair, but humiliate her. She wanted Richard to finally see how fragile his wife's world really was. And once it broke, she would be the one left standing. Lucas Donovan stepped off his private jet onto the warm tarmac, the sun casting a golden glow on his tailored navy blue suit. A car was already waiting to take him to the Carter estate. It had been a while since he'd visited, but when he received the baby shower invitation from Emily, he didn't hesitate. The delicate, handwritten card had made him smile. Despite his empire of startups, global meetings, and a net worth that had recently crossed 9 figures, Lucas still made time for the people who truly mattered. Years ago, back when they were all just starting out, Lucas had met Emily through Richard at a company launch party. Emily had stood out instantly, not because of glamour, but because of grace. She had laughed at Lucas's bad jokes, asked thoughtful questions about his work, and treated him like a person, not a rising tech prodigy. He remembered thinking, just for a moment, that she might be the one. But she and Richard had already been serious. Lucas never said a word. Out of respect, for their relationship, for Richard, and for Emily's happiness, he stepped aside and focused on building his tech empire in New York. Still, he and Emily had kept in touch over the years. Holiday greetings, occasional video calls, and thoughtful messages during hard times like her miscarriage. When he heard she was pregnant again, he felt genuine joy for her. She deserved happiness, peace, and all the love in the world. As the car pulled up the long driveway of the Carters' grand home, Lucas looked out at the sprawling garden, where preparations for the shower were already underway. Servers moved gracefully under tents, decorators arranged floral centerpieces, and string lights were being hung along the hedges. Everything looked perfect. But Lucas sensed something beneath the surface, a tension in the air. He wasn't sure if it was just nerves or instinct, but something told him this event wouldn't go as smoothly as it appeared. Still, he shook off the feeling. He was here for Emily. No matter what, he'd be the friend she could count on. Even if things unraveled. Emily stood in front of her full-length mirror, hands gently resting on her belly as she admired her reflection. The pastel pink gown she wore flowed like silk over her baby bump, hugging her figure in all the right places. Her makeup was soft and glowing, her hair styled in loose waves that fell over her shoulders like golden ribbons. She looked every bit the glowing mother-to-be, and today was the day she had been dreaming about for months, her baby shower. Downstairs, the garden had been transformed into a fairy tale scene. Elegant canopies draped in blush fabric floated above tables set with gold-rimmed china and rose arrangements in tall crystal vases. A harpist played soft melodies near the fountain, while white doves perched in nearby cages, waiting to be released during the toast. Everything shimmered under the warm afternoon sun. Guests began arriving, Emily's college friends, neighbors, and family members she hadn't seen in years. They greeted her with warm hugs, compliments, and thoughtful gifts wrapped in pastel wrapping paper. Laughter and chatter filled the air, and Emily's cheeks ached from smiling. Her best friend Laura buzzed around, ensuring every detail ran smoothly, whispering updates to the servers and checking in on Emily every few minutes with a proud smile. But while Emily felt wrapped in warmth, one thing tugged at the edges of her joy: Richard. He was present, dressed in a sharp suit and smiling for the guests, but there was something off. His phone never left his hand. He stood slightly apart from the group, thumbing through messages, occasionally stepping away to take quiet calls. Whenever Emily looked his way, he offered a brief smile, a nod, but no warmth behind his eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked softly when she managed a quiet moment with him. "Yeah, just some work stuff," he muttered, glancing at his phone again. "Go enjoy your party." Emily nodded, but the moment left a strange hollowness in her chest. Still, she refused to let it ruin her day. She returned to her guests, hands cradling her belly, determined to soak in every second of the love surrounding her. She didn't know that, just then, Richard was texting Vanessa. And Vanessa was already en route, her heels clicking ominously on the polished floors of the approaching disaster. The crowd buzzed with cheerful conversation, the clinking of glasses and camera flashes capturing the elegant joy of the afternoon. Emily was standing near the dessert table, laughing softly with an aunt, when the mood shifted. It was subtle at first: whispers, lingering stares, and a sudden hush near the entrance. Vanessa Morgan had arrived. She moved through the garden like she owned it, draped in a form-fitting red dress that shimmered with every step. Her heels clicked defiantly on the stone path, her makeup bold and sharp, as if she'd come for a gala rather than a baby shower. Heads turned as she passed, some guests clearly confused, others too stunned to say a word. Emily blinked, confused. She wasn't on the RSVP list. Why was she here? "Vanessa," Emily greeted politely, masking her confusion behind a warm smile. "I wasn't sure if you got the invite. I didn't hear back." Vanessa flashed a saccharine smile, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Oh, I got it. I just couldn't miss celebrating such a special day." She glanced down at Emily's belly with a half-smirk. Before Emily could respond, Vanessa had already swept past her toward the crowd, where Richard was standing near the beverage table. His entire body stiffened when he saw her, and his face drained of color. He quickly glanced toward Emily, then back at Vanessa, panic in his eyes. Lucas, standing near the fountain with a drink in hand, noticed it all: the tension in Richard's shoulders, the smug satisfaction in Vanessa's strut, and the confusion tightening around Emily's expression. He narrowed his eyes, silently observing every move. Vanessa didn't wait long before making her presence more than obvious. She touched Richard's arm as she spoke, leaned in close, her voice low but flirtatious enough to be noticed. "You look tense, Richard," she purred. "You should learn to relax, like you did the other night." Several guests nearby froze. One woman gave a slight gasp. Richard tried to shush her, whispering through clenched teeth, but Vanessa only giggled, brushing a hand down his sleeve. Emily caught the exchange. Her heart stuttered, the warmth in her cheeks beginning to burn. Still she smiled, tight and trembling, and looked away. Not here, she told herself. Not today. But deep inside, something had cracked. And Lucas saw it. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the garden. Laughter and music continued to dance through the air, and despite her earlier discomfort, Emily had managed to pull herself together. She made her way around the tables, chatting with guests, accepting hugs, posing for photos, and smiling, even if the edges of that smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Vanessa, meanwhile, drifted through the crowd like a shadow dressed in fire. Her red dress clung to her as she floated from guest to guest, dropping sharp comments in soft tones and shooting glances at Richard every chance she got. Richard had barely spoken to Emily all afternoon, and the few times their eyes met, he looked anywhere but at her stomach. Emily noticed it. So did Lucas. But no one could have predicted what came next. As the final round of toasts began and a server brought out the three-tiered baby shower cake, decorated in soft pink frosting and tiny fondant baby booties, Vanessa suddenly tapped her champagne glass with a silver spoon. The clear clinking rang out like a bell slicing through silk, drawing everyone's attention. Conversations quieted. Phones tilted up. Heads turned. Emily looked up from her seat beside Laura, puzzled. Vanessa smiled. "I hope you don't mind," she said sweetly, voice loud enough to carry. "I'd like to say a few words." Emily blinked. She opened her mouth to speak, but Vanessa didn't wait. "I know I'm not the one you expected to hear from today," Vanessa said, swaying slightly on her heels, her voice syrupy and slow. "But I think it's time everyone knew the truth. After all, secrets ruin families, don't they?" The guests shifted, murmurs rising. Richard, now pale, took a step forward. "Vanessa, stop." Vanessa ignored him. "I've been sleeping with Richard for almost a year," she said clearly, proudly. "While his beautiful wife was at home planning this perfect little party and carrying his baby, he was in bed with me. Sometimes even at the office, sometimes at hotels." "Isn't that right, darling?" Gasps erupted. Someone dropped their glass. Laura stood up so fast her chair scraped across the floor. Lucas froze in place, his jaw clenching. Emily stared blankly at Vanessa, her vision tunneling. "And guess what?" Vanessa said, her voice rising. "He promised he'd leave her. But since we're all here pretending, I thought I'd do the honors myself." Before anyone could react, Vanessa turned and stormed over to the dessert table. With one swift motion, she plunged her hand into the cake, dragging her fingers down the layers and sending it crashing to the ground. Frosting smeared across the white tablecloth like a wound. Then she ripped down the floral garland, tore a row of pastel balloons with her nails, and flipped the nearest display tray of baby bottles. "Let's stop pretending this is a fairy tale," she shouted, spinning to face the crowd. The guests stared in horror. Some stood frozen. Others quickly grabbed their purses and edged away. A child began crying somewhere near the back. Emily didn't move. She couldn't. Her ears rang. Her breath came in short, broken gasps. Her world, the carefully crafted world she had poured her soul into, was crumbling in real time. Richard didn't deny a word. He stood there, speechless, guilty. And then she broke. Tears welled and spilled, her body shaking as she stumbled backward, grabbing onto Lara's arm for support. The humiliation, the betrayal, the pain, it all crashed down in an unbearable wave. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably as her guests stood watching. Vanessa, now satisfied, smoothed her dress and turned to leave. But someone else was already moving. Lucas. Lucas didn't hesitate. As the stunned silence held the guests captive, he was already pushing through the crowd. His eyes were locked on Emily, who sat crumpled in a chair, her hands shaking, her sobs tearing through the silence like thunder. Her pastel dress was now stained with cake frosting and tears, her mascara running down her cheeks, her belly rising and falling with every ragged breath. He knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her arm. "Emily," he said softly, his voice calm and steady. "You don't have to stay here. Come with me. Let's get you out of this mess." She looked at him, dazed, eyes wide with devastation, lips trembling. She couldn't find the words, but she nodded, barely, and that was enough. Lucas stood and wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. shielding her from the dozens of eyes still watching, from the whispers that were beginning to stir again. He helped her to her feet with the kind of care that made time slow. Lara rushed over and followed behind them, murmuring, "I'll bring the car around." As they started to move away, Richard finally seemed to come out of his stupor. He took a step forward, face pale, voice cracking. "Emily, please. I didn't mean." Lucas turned around slowly, eyes hard as steel. "Don't. Just don't." Richard opened his mouth, but Lucas stepped closer, his voice low but firm enough that even nearby guests could hear. "You didn't just cheat on your wife, Richard. You shattered her. Publicly. In front of everyone she loves. She gave you everything, and you threw it away for cheap thrills with a woman who clearly has no shame." Richard tried to defend himself, but Lucas cut him off. "You lost more than your marriage today," he said. "You lost her respect. You lost her dignity. And you lost the only person who ever truly believed in you." Then he turned back to Emily, who was gripping his arm now like a lifeline. Without another word, Lucas led her gently through the gates, away from the wreckage of a party that was meant to celebrate life, but ended with heartbreak. In that moment, Emily didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. The way she leaned into him said everything. The morning light poured into the living room, warm and soft, but it didn't reach Emily's heart. She sat curled on the edge of the couch, a blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders, staring blankly out the window. Her hands rested on her belly, as if drawing strength from the tiny heartbeat within her. The events of the previous day played on a loop in her mind. Vanessa's cruel words, Richard's silence, the sound of the cake crashing to the floor, the way the entire room had frozen around her as her world shattered. But today, Emily wasn't letting heartbreak paralyze her. Today, she was choosing something else. She stood up, slow but steady, and made her way to the kitchen where Lara and Lucas were already waiting. Lara had stayed overnight, refusing to leave her side. Lucas had returned early that morning, carrying coffee and silence, knowing sometimes words weren't necessary. "I need to do something," Emily said, her voice hoarse but clear. "I'm done pretending." "He's out." An hour later, Richard stood at the door, suitcase in hand, eyes sunken and remorseful. "Emily, please. You don't live here anymore," she said firmly, arms folded across her chest. "I already filed. You'll get the papers." He tried to speak, but she closed the door on him. The sound echoed like closure. Later that afternoon, Emily's phone buzzed with notifications, messages, calls, and links. A guest had filmed the entire baby shower disaster. The video, titled, "Mistress Crashes Pregnant Wife's Baby Shower, Public Affair Exposed," had already gone viral. Within hours, news outlets picked it up. Comments poured in, almost all on Emily's side. People calling her strong, heartbroken for her, condemning Vanessa and Richard's cruelty. At his office, Richard was asked to take a leave of absence. Vanessa deleted her social media after being relentlessly dragged online. Their reputations, once pristine, were now tainted. But in Emily's home, there was peace. Not happiness, not yet, but a silence that held promise. Lara brought her tea. Lucas helped her draft the first outline of her new future, stronger, independent, and on her terms. She wasn't just a broken wife anymore. She was a woman rebuilding. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the occasional cooing sounds of a newborn. Emily cradled her daughter in her arms, tears glistening in her eyes, not from pain, but from joy so overwhelming it left her breathless. Her baby girl was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, a button nose, and sleepy eyes that blinked up at her with innocent wonder. She had made it through the storm, and now she held her reason to keep going. She named her Hope, because that's what this child had been from the very start. Hope through betrayal. Hope through heartbreak. Hope for a future that would never again be defined by someone else's lies. Lucas was the first to visit, his eyes lighting up the moment he stepped into the room. He brought a bouquet of soft pink roses and a silver bracelet engraved with the name, Hope. "For the strongest woman I know," he said, placing it gently in Emily's hand. Weeks later, after bringing Hope home and settling into her new rhythm as a single mother, Emily did something no one expected. She launched the Hope Foundation, dedicated to helping single mothers who had faced betrayal, abandonment, or abuse. She poured her energy into it, turning her pain into a mission. Lucas quietly became the foundation's biggest donor, never asking for recognition, only helping her dreams flourish. To honor her daughter's birth and this new beginning, Emily hosted a baby celebration, not a do-over of the ruined shower, but something entirely her own. Held at a serene lakefront venue, the event was soft and intimate. Fairy lights glowed above round tables draped in cream linen. Laughter filled the air, and the air smelled of lavender and freshly baked pastries. Guests brought blessings instead of gifts. Emily stood before them in a flowing white dress, Hope in her arms, and said simply, "This is what love looks like." There were no scandals, no destruction, only healing, growth, and a peace Emily had never known before. This time, it wasn't about what she had lost, but about everything she had found. It didn't take long for Richard to come crawling back. A month after Hope's birth, he showed up at Emily's doorstep with a bouquet in hand and regret etched across his face. His voice trembled with apologies, promises to change, desperate appeals to the past they had shared. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "Let's fix this. For our daughter." But Emily stood taller now, clearer. The pain he'd caused no longer controlled her. She looked him in the eyes and said with calm finality, "You didn't just break us, you broke me. And I rebuilt myself without you." She closed the door and didn't look back. Meanwhile, Vanessa's fall was swift and merciless. With the viral video still echoing across social platforms, her name became synonymous with scandal. She was let go from her job, blacklisted from several firms, and publicly dumped by Richard when his reputation tanked further. Alone and bitter, Vanessa faded from the spotlight she had once craved. Emily, on the other hand, rose like fire from ashes. Her foundation flourished. News outlets began featuring her story, not just the betrayal, but the strength she'd shown afterward. Interviews, local panels, and online articles dubbed her the woman who turned pain into power. She became a symbol of resilience, especially among women who had felt voiceless for too long. Lucas, always in the background, remained her quiet strength. He never sought praise or attention, never used his support as leverage. When Emily floated the idea of expanding the Hope Foundation beyond their city, Lucas made a few calls, just enough to open the right doors. New branches opened in 3 states within months. Every time Emily thanked him, he would simply smile and say, "You did this. I just helped a little." To the world, Emily was a single mother, a survivor, a leader. But to Lucas, she was something more, a force of nature who had found herself not through revenge, but through purpose. And as she stood on stages speaking to hundreds, Hope nestled in her arms, Lucas remained exactly where he'd always been, right by her side. The grand ballroom glowed beneath chandeliers that cast soft golden light over hundreds of elegantly dressed guests. Strings of fairy lights twinkled along the high ceilings, and a delicate arrangement of white roses adorned every table. It was the first annual gala for the Hope Foundation, and every detail reflected Emily's heart, elegant, strong, and full of purpose. A year had passed since the baby shower that had shattered her world. In that time, she had become someone even she didn't fully recognize, steadfast, visionary, and unafraid. The heartbreak was no longer fresh, it had become a scar that reminded her of how far she'd come. Hope, now just over 1 year old, had grown into a smiling, curious child who clung to her mother's arm earlier in the evening, dressed in a tiny white dress with matching shoes. As the night progressed, donors praised the foundation's work, volunteers shared stories of impact, and Emily gave a powerful speech that left many wiping tears from their eyes. Out of pain, we built hope. Out of betrayal, we built purpose. And out of fear, we found courage. This foundation was born the same day my daughter was, and both have changed me forever. She stepped down from the stage to a round of applause, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found Lucas, standing quietly near the back, as he always did, never drawing attention to himself. He was in a sleek black tuxedo, a soft smile playing on his lips. Their eyes met and held for just a second too long before she turned away, heart pounding. Later, as the crowd thinned and the band played a soft jazz tune, Lucas found her standing alone on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of roses and possibility. "You were amazing up there," he said, stepping beside her. Emily smiled. "I had a good team, and one very steady supporter." Lucas hesitated for a moment, then took a breath. "Emily, I've tried to keep my feelings out of the way. I never wanted to complicate your healing. But I need you to know, being near you, watching your strength, your heart. I've fallen for you. Completely." Emily turned to face him. There was no hesitation in her eyes, only warmth. "I know," she whispered. "And I'm not afraid anymore." Then, beneath the soft lights of the ballroom and the stars beyond the balcony, she leaned in and kissed him. Applause erupted from behind them. Some guests had seen. Others just knew. But the sound didn't matter. What mattered was that this time, it wasn't built on illusion. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real.